Layla, Mike Tyson's daughter, was driving to the store to buy snacks for a movie night with her dad. She was excited about spending time with him and wanted to make the night special by picking up all their favorite treats. But as she drove through the peaceful neighborhood, things were about to take a scary turn. While Layla was driving, a police officer named Officer Clara saw her and instantly felt a strong dislike towards her. Officer Clara had a reputation for being rude and mean to people, especially people who didn't look like him. When he saw Layla, he immediately thought she was trouble just because of how she looked. This made him angry and he decided to approach her. He didn't know Layla at all, but he already judged her. When Layla parked her car and walked into the store, she was focused on finding the best snacks for movie night. She was in a good mood, smiling and chatting with the store workers, trying to pick out the freshest fruits and vegetables for her family. But Layla didn't know that Officer Clara was watching her from a distance. He didn't like the way she was smiling or talking to the store worker. His bad attitude grew, and soon he decided to confront her. Officer Clara walked over to Layla, and without any warning, he said in a rude voice, "Do you have a permit to be loitering around here?" Layla was surprised and confused. She had done nothing wrong. She was just shopping like everyone else. But instead of reacting angrily, she calmly replied, "Excuse me, I'm just shopping like everyone else." But Officer Clara wasn't satisfied with her answer. His face turned red with anger and he snapped, "Don't get smart with me." His voice was full of hate. He was clearly looking for a reason to make things difficult. "People like you always think you can do whatever you want," he said, looking down at her with a harsh, judgmental gaze. Layla felt the heat rising in her chest, but she didn't want to make things worse. She stayed calm, trying to walk away and get back to her shopping. But Officer Clara wouldn't let her leave. He stepped right into her path, blocking her way. "Let me pass, please," Layla said, trying to remain calm. "I haven't done anything wrong." She was starting to feel more nervous now, but she still didn't want to argue. But Officer Clara wasn't backing down. His anger had reached a boiling point and he stood there, glaring at Layla. He crossed his arms and said, "Oh, you haven't done anything wrong? Then why are you trying to walk away from me?" His voice was full of authority and power, like he had the right to tell her what to do. Layla, feeling trapped and scared, looked at him and said, "Please let me pass. I'm just trying to get home. I haven't done anything wrong." But Officer Clara was already so angry that he wasn't listening. He didn't care about Layla's words. "I need to see your ID," he demanded, his voice hard and sharp. Layla felt her heart race as she reached into her purse to grab her ID. She was confused and didn't understand why this was happening. She wasn't doing anything wrong. But she didn't want to make things worse, so she hurried to find her ID. "Hurry up!" Officer Clara yelled, growing more impatient. "Don't make me repeat myself." Layla tried to stay calm, but it was getting harder. She finally found her ID and handed it to Officer Clara. But she couldn't shake the feeling that something was wrong. "I haven't done anything wrong," Layla said, trying to explain herself. "You're just harassing me for no reason." She was speaking more firmly now, but Officer Clara's anger only seemed to grow. Officer Clara stepped even closer to Layla, his face almost touching hers. His eyes were burning with rage and he whispered, "You want to make this hard? I can make it very difficult for you." Layla knew that something terrible was happening. She wasn't just talking to an officer anymore. She was facing someone who didn't care about what was right. Layla knew she had to protect herself, so she quickly grabbed her phone from her purse and started recording. "I'm recording this," Layla said, her voice steady despite the fear she felt. She knew that if things got out of hand, at least she would have proof of what was happening. But Officer Clara wasn't having it. He became even angrier when he saw the phone in her hand. "Put that phone down," he shouted, his voice filled with venom. "You don't want this to go any further." He was threatening her, trying to make her feel scared. But Layla didn't back down. She held her phone firmly and kept recording. "I'm not going to stop recording," Layla said, her voice strong now. She refused to let him bully her or scare her into silence. Officer Clara's face turned even more red with fury. He couldn't believe that Layla wasn't afraid of him. In one quick move, he lunged toward her and grabbed the phone out of her hand. He smashed it onto the ground with so much force that the screen shattered into pieces. The sound of the phone hitting the ground was loud and shocking. Layla couldn't believe what just happened. Her heart raced and she felt a wave of anger wash over her. "You can't do that. You're a police officer. You're supposed to protect people, not hurt them," she yelled, her voice shaking. But Officer Clara wasn't listening. He was too far gone in his anger. "I told you to stop recording," he snarled. "Now you're going to pay for not listening." Before Layla could say anything else, Officer Clara struck her with a hard punch to the side of her face. The blow was so powerful that it sent Layla stumbling backward. She lost her balance and fell to the ground with a loud thud. The shock of her fall stunned everyone around her, and for a moment, the whole market was silent. People gasped and looked at each other in disbelief. Layla lay there on the ground, her face hurting from the punch. She was shocked, but she didn't give up. The whole scene had happened so quickly, but Layla knew one thing. Her father was about to find out what had happened, and he wasn't going to let anyone get away with hurting his daughter. Layla was sitting on the ground, hurt and scared, holding her face. She looked up, feeling the pain in her cheek. "Please, someone help me," she whispered, her voice trembling. Clara, the police officer who had hurt her, turned around. His voice was a low growl, full of anger. "No one's going to help you," he said coldly. The people who had been watching before, too shocked to move or speak, started to wake up to what had just happened. They felt anger rising inside them. One of them, a man in the crowd, couldn't stay silent anymore. He stepped forward, his voice loud and full of righteous anger. "Hey, you can't do that. She's just a kid. Leave her alone," he shouted at Clara. Clara spun around, his anger burning even hotter. He looked at the man and growled, "Stay out of this or you'll be next." Layla's body still shook with the shock of what had happened to her. She couldn't believe it. Her cheek hurt so much and it was swelling up. She tried to make sense of what had just happened. With trembling hands, she touched her sore face, feeling the bruise forming. Tears filled her eyes. She looked at Clara, the person who had just hurt her. "Why are you doing this?" she whispered, her voice full of confusion and fear. Clara looked at her with cold, hateful eyes. His voice was cruel and mean as he spoke. "Maybe this will teach you some respect. Next time you think about challenging a police officer, you'll think twice." Layla's heart raced. She was filled with both pain and anger. She raised her voice, shaking with emotion. "Respect? You assaulted me. You're the one who doesn't deserve respect," she shouted, her words filled with the truth. Back at home, Mike Tyson, Layla's father, was enjoying a peaceful day. It was quiet and he was relaxed. Suddenly his phone made a noise. He reached over to the coffee table and picked it up, wondering who could be calling. He saw a notification on his screen. When he opened it, a voice came through and it was full of panic and fear. "Mr. Tyson, listen to me. Your daughter has been assaulted by a police officer at the market. You need to get here right now." Mike's heart stopped for a moment. He felt a cold wave of fear and worry crash over him. "What? Which officer? Is Layla okay?" he asked, his voice full of concern. The person on the other end of the phone sounded scared. "It was Officer Clara, sir." Mike's calm expression shattered. His eyes filled with fury and without thinking, he grabbed his keys from the table. His fingers were tight around them, so tight that his knuckles turned white. "Clara," he said under his breath, his voice full of anger. His mind raced, remembering that name. Clara was the one who hurt his daughter. Mike moved quickly, not wasting a second. He rushed out the door, his body moving like a panther on the hunt. His mind was focused on one thing, getting to his daughter. When Mike arrived at the market, he saw chaos. People were talking, some were comforting Layla, and others were shouting about what had just happened. Layla was sitting on the curb, her face swollen and bruised from the attack. Tears were in her eyes, but her face also showed strength. She wasn't going to let the pain defeat her. Mike's heart ached seeing his daughter like this, but he didn't show it. Instead, his eyes burned with anger. "Layla, are you okay?" Mike asked, rushing to her side. His voice was full of worry. Before Layla could answer, the crowd parted, and Mike saw Officer Clara walking toward him. Clara wore a twisted smile, like he was enjoying the situation. "Is this your daddy? Looks like disrespect runs in your family," Clara said, mocking them both. Mike stood up straight, taller than Clara, his presence making it clear he wasn't scared. His voice was low and full of anger. "What did you do to my daughter?" he asked, his voice cold like ice. Clara just laughed. He was full of confidence, thinking he could still control the situation. She needed to learn a lesson. "Maybe you do too," Clara sneered. "You think you can intimidate me, Tyson? You're just a washed-up has-been." The people around them started to move away, sensing that something big was about to happen. The air was thick with tension. Clara, feeling too confident, swung a punch at Mike. But Mike was ready. He moved like a pro, dodging the punch easily. He was fast like a tiger. Clara swung again, but this time his punch missed completely. He was growing frustrated, and Mike could see that. Mike looked at him, calm and collected, his voice like steel. "Wrong move," he said, his words heavy with warning. With that, Mike took action. He didn't hesitate. He threw a punch at Clara, and the force of it made the crowd gasp. It was a punch full of strength and power, and it knocked Clara back. The people around them cheered, sensing the justice that was about to be served. Some people pulled out their phones, recording the moment when Mike Tyson stood up to protect his daughter. Clara, now furious and embarrassed, reached for his baton. He swung it at Mike, trying to hit him. But Mike was too fast. He blocked the baton with his forearm, and the loud clang of metal against his arm rang out through the market. Mike didn't give up. He quickly countered with a flurry of punches, quick jabs to Clara's chest and a powerful hit to his jaw. Clara gasped for air, struggling to breathe. "Enough!" he shouted, his voice full of desperation. Mike wasn't finished. His eyes were full of rage, but they were also calm. He looked at Clara with a promise in his voice. "You think you can hurt my family and get away with it?" "Not today," Mike said, his voice dark and serious. Mike stepped back, ready for the next round. He squared his shoulders and prepared to end it. "It's time for you to answer for what you've done," he said, his voice full of power. Then Mike's fists moved like lightning. He threw punch after punch, each one stronger than the last. Clara couldn't keep up. He was out of breath, out of strength, and outmatched. Mike's punches were like hammers, each blow landing with a force that made Clara stagger back. The crowd watched in awe, cheering for Mike. Clara finally couldn't take it anymore. He stumbled and fell to the ground, bruised and beaten. The fight was over. Mike Tyson had shown the world what happens when you mess with his family. Mike was breathing heavily, his chest moving up and down as he tried to catch his breath. "You picked the wrong person to mess with," he said, his voice firm and strong. He was clearly upset, but he was also ready to stand his ground. Just after the fight, the sound of sirens filled the air. The police were coming. People turned their heads as they heard the loud screeching of tires, followed by 2 police cars speeding into the scene. The cars kicked up a cloud of dust as they came to a stop. The officers quickly got out of their cars. Their faces were serious, and they started looking around, taking in everything that had just happened. The crowd, still gathered around, was watching closely. Some people pointed at their phones, eager to show the videos they had taken of the fight. One of the officers stepped forward. He walked straight up to Clara, who was lying on the ground, shaking. The officer looked at Clara with cold, steady eyes, not showing any pity or fear. "Clara, you're under arrest for assault and misconduct. You're coming with us," he said firmly. Clara, still lying in the dirt, tried to argue. "He attacked me," he protested weakly, his voice trembling. The officer didn't even blink. He didn't believe Clara. Instead, he gave him a hard, disapproving look. "We have a video that shows what really happened," he said. "You can't lie about this." Clara kept trying to explain himself, but the officer didn't listen. The truth was clear in the video, and Clara's lies couldn't change that. With a swift motion, the officers put cold handcuffs on Clara. The sharp sound of metal clinking against metal echoed in the quiet space. It was a sound that meant there was no going back. Clara was being taken away. As Clara was escorted by the officers, still shouting and cursing in anger, the crowd stayed silent. No one was paying attention to him anymore. Mike, however, was looking at Layla. His face softened as he saw her, still shaken from what had happened. Without a second thought, Mike went to her, wrapping his arms around her in a strong, protective hug. Layla, overwhelmed by everything, buried her face in her dad's chest. She cried, her body shaking with emotion. Through her tears, Layla managed to say in a quiet voice, "Thank you, Dad." Mike's voice was steady, full of love and strength. "No one messes with my family ever," he said, holding her tighter. The people who had been watching the whole time started to clap and cheer. They admired Mike for his bravery and the way he stood up for his daughter. His words seemed to echo in the air, and the crowd nodded, agreeing with what he had said. Then the chant started, "Tyson, Tyson, Tyson." The whole crowd was cheering for Mike. Layla, wiping away her tears, looked up at her dad and smiled. "You're a hero, Dad," she said, her voice full of gratitude. Before long, the video of what happened spread across social media, and it quickly went viral. People everywhere saw what Clara had done, and the truth couldn't be ignored. Clara's bad actions were caught on camera, and because of that, he faced serious consequences. He lost his job, and a criminal investigation began against him. As Clara was taken away in handcuffs, the people who had once been scared of him now cheered and laughed. They were glad to see him getting what he deserved. The scene then shifted to a quiet evening at Mike and Layla's home. The house felt warm and safe after all the chaos of the day. Mike and Layla sat on the couch watching a movie together. Layla, still feeling shaken from everything that had happened, leaned against her dad, finding comfort in his strong embrace. She felt safe with him there. After a little while, Layla smiled and playfully nudged her dad. "Hey, remember those snacks for movie night? I think you were just looking for a way to avoid spending time with me," she teased. Mike grinned and draped his arm over her shoulders. "Oh really? Looks like someone is hoping for a special treat. What do you think, Layla? Popcorn?" Layla giggled, and for a moment, everything felt normal again. The world outside was quiet, and they were just a family enjoying each other's company. The camera slowly zoomed out, capturing the warmth of their home. The soft glow of the television, the comfort of the couch, and the quiet love between Mike and Layla all spoke of the strength of their bond. In that peaceful moment, it was clear that nothing was more important than family, love, and the unbreakable support they gave each other. If you enjoyed this story, share your thoughts in the comments below and don't forget to subscribe for more stories. I'll see you in the next video.